right, let's get started. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Greetings, everyone. For those who may have just joined, please introduce yourself in the chat as we get started. And we just want to thank you for joining us today. This is the Richmond Fund for Children and Youth, fiscal year 21-22 request for proposal meeting. We'll be going over and sharing a lot of great information. It's jam-packed with information. We will have opportunities for you to ask questions at the end of the presentation, but you also can use the Q&A feature to type in questions. We will try our best to answer them throughout the presentation. We are recording this session. This is our second of two meetings. That's our final one. So we will be placing one of these meetings on the website for those of you you can look back at it. You can share it with others, but we hope this is useful. I am LaShonda White. I serve as the director for the Department of Children and Youth, and I would like for my esteemed colleagues to please introduce themselves. Start with Mr. Padilla.
Hello, everyone. My name is David Padilla, Department of Children and Youth. It's nice to see you all joining our webinar today, and happy that you're all able to learn some more information. And I'll also add too that we are using the Q&A feature today during the presentation. So if you have a question, feel free to click the Q&A and you can ask it while we're presenting. And like LaShonda mentioned, we'll also have time after in case you'd like to share your question verbally or have more information to share. And with that, I'll pass it over to Guadalupe Morales, another team member in our department.
Hello, Guadalupe Morales, also support the Department of Children and Youth. I'm also work under the Community Services Recreation Division Department as well. And I'll pass it over to Patrick.
Good afternoon, Patrick Seals. I support the Department of Children and Youth, and I also support ECIA grant and looking forward to engaging with you all today.
All right, this is the team. Plus we have a wonderful intern, Callie Luke, who is not able to join us, but she has been super supportive and helpful throughout this process. And there are a number of other interns that have provided support over the 2 years. Too many to name. All right, let's get started. So here's the outline of today's presentation. We'll do an overview of the department and the Fund for Children and Youth. We will talk about eligibility and guidelines. I'll turn it over to Patrick. He will review the application in detail, and then we will have an opportunity for next steps. I'll talk about next steps and we'll open it up for questions and comments. Next slide, please. So the Richmond Kids First Initiative, also called Measures E and K, was placed on the ballot in June of 2018. It passed, and as a result of that, it became Article 15 of the Richmond Charter. So as Patrick and I move forward in this presentation, you may hear us refer to the charter, but that is where those two measures, once approved, were combined and incorporated. The charter did a number of things. It established the Department of Children and Youth, and we have been in existence. We're a brand new department, been in existence for a little bit over 2 years. It also required that we establish a 15-member Oversight Board. Please go to our website. We have highlights of all of our board members. You can see their faces, learn a little bit about them and why they have decided to be on the board. We are really excited about our board. We have 8 youth and 7 adults, and we are working with them. They are doing amazing, amazing work. So we're really happy to have all of our board members, very diverse group. And then it also established the Fund for Children and Youth, which is the money piece. And we will talk about that a little later. Next slide. So here is the money piece. Per the charter, in the first initial years, there was a set aside of some funds to help really just grow the department, establish the department. We are utilizing those funds still in the current fiscal year, which is 2021, and our fiscal years run from June 30th to July 1st. I'm sorry, July 1st to June 30th, excuse me. And so we're utilizing that $950,000 has spread and provided us assistance and the ability to support the work. starting next fiscal year, starting July 1st, there is a mandatory 1% allocation of the city's general fund that has to be set aside to support the work of the department and to be able to allow for grants to be provided to community-based and governmental entities that are providing services to our young people. That amount goes up to 2% and then 3% in fiscal year 23-24, and that's where it stays. Next slide. Part of what was required in the charter was for us to conduct a community needs assessment and to develop a strategic investment plan, and then to release a request for proposals to initiate the grant, competitive grant component of this work. And so in order for us to do all of that, we really knew that community engagement was central in this work. So we did a number of things. We established a service provider working group. Some of you on this call may have participated in that, but that was governmental entities and community-based organizations, just various stakeholders, parents, whoever was interested in joining. We gathered together and we were able as the department to share information, and we also got input along the way in terms of the steps we were taking. We really know that all of you are experts at providing the services you provide, and we want to make sure we're benefiting from your expertise. The service provider working group helped us create a community engagement process, and for us to be able to do the community needs assessment as well as the strategic investment plan. So through the community needs assessment, we were able to do and collect information about what is needed in our community to celebrate what already exists. And figure out what some of our gaps are. And so we were able to collect that information through focus groups and surveys and community forums. That information is on our website. And we also, from that, were able to develop a strategic investment plan. Through all the information gathered through the community needs assessment, 6 priorities were established. And these are our funding priorities for our 3-year period for which the RFP is centered around. Next slide. Here are our 2 reports. Please visit our website and you can get this information in terms of our community needs assessment. It's just a wealth of information in there, so I just advise you to read it. It may be beneficial to the work that you're doing in your own program. Also, our strategic investment plan, which goes into detail about the 6 priority areas that will help you as you decide which priority area you should submit an application under. Next slide. So we have approximately, what we're holding is 1.5 million right now to award to grants in our initial year, award for grants in our initial year. And those organizations that are successful and are recommended for funding and approved by City Council for funding have the ability to receive renewal for those grants for up to 2 additional years. As I stated, our strategic investment plan covered a 3-year period. And so there is an opportunity for continued access to funds in years 2 and 3, but we also are planning on reopening the application process in this initial year or this initial period in year 2 for new organizations that didn't apply before or organizations that did not get funded in year 1. And this funding is set aside to address the issues, some of the issues facing our young people in both Richmond and unincorporated North Richmond. Next slide. Here are the 6 priority areas that I've mentioned that came out of that community needs assessment process. They are not in order of priority. You can see what they are, and this shows you how we allocated the $1.5 million. And these percentages and dollar amounts are not set in stone, and staff as well as the Oversight Board have some flexibility in terms of those allocation amounts per priority area. Next slide. Now we're going to talk about eligibility and guidelines. Next slide, please. You will see as we move through these slides reference to page numbers. These page numbers are included, are a part of the RFP. So if you wanted to follow along as you listen to this presentation, you can do that. So the entities that are eligible for funding include organizations that serve young people under the age of 24. You can be a public agency, or you can be a nonprofit community-based organization. If you are a nonprofit, you have to have 501c3 tax status. If you don't, you can partner with a fiscal sponsor. You can utilize a fiscal sponsor that has 501c3 tax status. Staff will not help you find that fiscal sponsor. You will have to do that on your own. And we will be, as a city, we'll be engaging in a contract or with that fiscal sponsor and not you as a community-based organization. And we also ask for a variety of different documents, including financial information. Next slide. So I know there's a lot of questions about applicants that have already submitted applications. So for those of you who may not be aware, we are having, this is our second series of pre-proposal meetings, because we opened January 1st, or released the application January 1st per the charter, and closed it later in February. And we're going through the review process. But in April, our city council requested that we reopen the application process to enable additional applicants, additional organizations to apply for funding. This will not, this will not impact those of you who have already submitted an application. So our timeline has gotten pushed because of that, but we are excited about the additional organizations that will be submitting applications to meet the needs that we have in this community. So just want to quickly go over if you're a current applicant, what you need to do. If your organization has already submitted an application and you do not want to make any updates, you're fine with what you submitted, it was gold when you submitted it and it's still golden right now, you don't have to do anything. Your application is still good. If we already informed you that you passed threshold review and you're in the review process, you don't have to do anything. However, if you're an organization that already submitted an application and you want to make updates, you have to do two things. You have to notify us, and we're asking for you to notify us by close of business for us, which is 5 p.m. tomorrow, to tell us that you want to withdraw your application. So please let us know. If you don't tell us, your application as written will stand and will stay in the cycle or stay in the process. And then you'll have to resubmit your application by our deadline, which is 2 p.m. on June 1st. So you have to do two steps. Let us know, number one, you want to withdraw your application. And then, it's up to you, but we're hoping that you resubmit your application by the deadline. If your organization has previously submitted an application as a lead agency, you can submit an additional application as a lead agency. So we'll talk about it later, but you can submit up to 3 applications as a lead agency. You may decide that you want to join in a collaborative and submit an application. So this gives organizations opportunities to either submit new applications or to revise their existing applications. Next slide. We're going to talk about more about eligibility and go into information about location, collaboration, and youth voice. Next slide. So for location, per the charter states that those organizations that are providing services to young people, you met that requirement, great. You are a community-based organization, you have 501c3 tax status, you're a governmental agency, great. Now, do you meet the location eligibility requirements? You have to either be located in North Richmond, unincorporated North Richmond, or Richmond, but you also can be located outside, but in close proximity to Richmond. And the way in which we have defined close proximity for this RFP are those cities within West County, so Richmond, San Pablo, El Cerrito, Hercules, Pinole, and then the surrounding unincorporated areas. Next slide, please. Collaboration, this is key. This is one of the areas for which we did we made some changes to the guidelines, and we'll talk about that in a little more detail, but we encourage collaboration. We encourage it so much, we created a category called for collaboration. So we encourage you, if you can collaborate, please do so. If you want to jointly apply for funding, please do so. You actually have a benefit because you have access to additional grant resources if you do that, or grant requests if you do that, but collaboration is just strongly encouraged. Next slide. So here is the revision, the main revision we made. We made a few other changes to the RFP. If people are interested in seeing what those revisions are, you can take a look at our website, and our board approved the changes, and you can see those different changes in the agenda packet that went to our board on May 3rd. But the main change are for those organizations that are listed in Article 15 of the Charter, Section 5B. So we're going to call them 5B organizations. These were organizations where, per the charter, it said that certain organizations could not access funds unless they did so in collaboration with community-based organizations. Initially, we defined that as having that collaborative work had to be done jointly. You had to apply as a under the collaborative category, which means those two organizations or two or more organizations submitted an application together. They were sharing resources. So if you decide to do that as a 5B organization, you still can. But our revision to our definition of collaboration is allowing those organizations listed under Section 5B to apply on their own. So you can apply as a single entity, but what you have to do is meet the definition of collaboration that's described here. And you have to make sure you demonstrate that clearly, articulate that clearly in the application. There are questions that will guide you to be able to do that, but just understand that we want to see that as an organization that you have sought input, you have communicated with, you have really talked to a community-based organization about how the services you want to provide through this grant program will best respond to community needs. And these needs are about the needs of children, youth, and young adults. So you can apply on your own if you're a 5B organization. You don't have to share your resources, but you do have to clearly articulate how you're collaborating with a community-based organization. But you also can decide that you want to apply under the collaborative category. So I just want to make that really clear. 2 ways for which those organizations can access funding. Next slide. And here are the list of those 5B organizations. If you are not listed here, you just can make a decision about how you want to apply. You can apply on your own, you can apply as a collaborative. This just expands the options for these organizations listed here in terms of the revision that was made and part of the reason why this was reopened. So if you are the school district, the Richmond Library Department, the Office of Neighborhood Safety, Richmond Promise, Richmond Housing Authority, or Richmond Youth Works, you now can apply as a single entity, but articulate and demonstrate collaboration in the application as part of your written application, or you can, based on what you think is best for you as an organization, you can apply jointly under the collaborative category. Next slide. Youth voice. We strongly encourage for all organizations to demonstrate. There is a question in the application, but just remember that this is a fund for children and youth. We want to know how you are incorporating youth voice, how you are allowing youth voice to be at the center of what it is that you're doing, how you're incorporating young people into your program design, implementation, outreach, evaluation. So just please articulate that. It's really exciting for us to hear how that is happening in your application. Next slide. Fiscal sponsorship, briefly mentioned this, it's on page 11, but you have to have 501c3 tax status. If you don't have it, you can work with a fiscal sponsor. And once again, that fiscal sponsor will serve as the applicant, and there'll be clear directions on the application for that. And then there'll be a signed agreement between you as a community-based organization, the sponsoree, and the fiscal sponsor. But we will have the relationship with the fiscal sponsor. Next slide. Use of funds. It is to provide services that meet one of the 6 priority areas for young people under the age of 24. Next slide. There's also a list of what you cannot use the funds for, so please go read that. We do not want you to spend your time asking for funding for something we will not fund. So please just take a look at that. It's a number of items on that list. Next slide, please. Here are the three different application types, the three different categories. So for which you can submit an application under. So once you know you are eligible, your next really major big decision is what category are you going to apply under? So automatically, if you have a budget, an annual budget, this is why we ask for financial information of under $250,000, you will be automatically in the small and emerging category, and you'll be evaluated against other organizations that are in the small and emerging category. If you have a budget greater than $250,000, you can apply as a single agency. If you decide that you want to go and be a part of a collaborative and apply under the collaborative category, you can be any combination of small and emerging single agency that can apply under that category, and it doesn't matter the budget. Next slide. So for collaborative applicants, there's more information on page 13. Once again, we strongly encourage that across all types of organizations. So please take a look at the different components, different sections of the RFP for more information. Next slide. Here's a few examples just to help. If you are, this is about location eligibility. So once again, you have to meet our location eligibility as a lead agency. So as a lead agency, if you are within, we meet our location guidelines for our location criteria, and you want to be a part of a collaborative with someone who does not meet location criteria or eligibility criteria, then that is okay. You can submit and be part of a collaborative. Next slide. Here is about funding. And so if you decide to apply as a collaborative, there's information there, please read it. We require that because you're sharing resources, so just say you're asking for $200,000 under the collaborative category, two organizations. One organization is asking for 120, the other is asking for 80. We are making a determination that the organization that has 50% or more of the requested funding is the lead agency. So that automatically will be the lead agency. And so there's more information in the RFP if you have questions about that, and we're happy to answer those here now also. Next slide. Number of applications you can submit. We understand that organizations are dynamic and they do various things. And so we are allowing organizations, lead agencies, to submit no more than three proposals. So you can submit between 1 and 3, up to you. You can be a part of more than that. If there's collaboratives, if you are listed as a partner, that's okay also. But as a lead agency, you can submit up to 3 applications. They should be different. Don't submit the same application under 3 priority areas. We will catch it. And you'll have to make a determination of which one you want to have remain in the process. And so just be thinking about that. And for public agencies, you can submit multiple proposals based on departments or divisions. Next slide. Here's a summary of the different application types and some of the other things we mentioned in the RFP. So by category, there are different minimum and maximum amounts that can be requested. And you can see what those are here. And here's where we talked about the advantage of applying as a collaborative. You can ask for up to $200,000. And so that allows you to spread the resources across multiple organizations. In terms of maximum award, that will be allowed across all application areas per organization. This is a recommendation, which is not a hard and fast rule. And it'll be up to our Oversight Board in terms of how they make the recommendation for organizations that should be funded to City Council. But the idea behind this is that not one organization, not a small number of organizations can access all of the grant funds. We want to try, because we know there are so many great organizations out there and there's so much need, that we want to try and spread the love as much as possible. We have information about indirect rates and matches, and we will talk more about that later, but they are consistent at 20% for indirect rate and 15% for a match across all the different categories. Next slide. Here's, we have two examples that are coming. If you have an annual budget as an organization of $300,000, that will mean you are automatically applying as a single agency under that category. And your maximum request per the chart we just showed you is $150,000. And so what we are recommending, it's not a requirement, but we're recommending is that if you, that you don't have your request go over 40% of your organization's budget. So doing the math, that means that what you would be requesting would be a max of 120, even though you could request 150. So it's not a requirement, it is a recommendation that you are not, for some organizations, we are hoping we don't see that you are, your budget is, you know, 150,000 and you're asking us for $150,000. We are hoping that you have different diverse revenue sources to support the great work that you're doing, and that you're not solely dependent upon the Richmond Fund for Children and Youth. So this is a way in which we can hopefully help make sure that doesn't happen. But once again, it's a recommendation and not a requirement. Next slide. Indirect cost. Once again, single agency, annual budget of $300,000. Our maximum indirect rate is 20%. So that means the other 80%, if you're asking for $100,000, the other $80,000 can go to provide direct support to for the services that you're providing under the grant application. The other 20%, the $20,000, can support overhead and other items that are listed under our indirect category. And in our RFP, pages 40 to 42, we really tried to define what that looks like. So please take a look at that and make sure your budget reflects that information. Next slide, please. Here's another example in terms of the match requirement. So we're asking for a 15% match. So if you're asking for $100,000, we're hoping to see that in your budget, we see that 15% of your request is available from other revenue sources. So it could be cash, it could be leveraging another grant, it could be in-kind services. But once again, we want to, we're hoping that your program, this helps us know if your program is sustainable and you are asking for and getting funding from other sources to make sure your program can be available for years to come, hopefully, to our community. Next slide, please. Here are 6 priority areas again. Please take a look at the funding priority areas in the RFP. Starts on page 21. And in that section, we break out each area and we provide some information about what it is, some options, ideas for supported programming under those priority areas, what populations we are hoping that you focus on in those priority areas, and some desired outcomes and indicators. This is not the end all be all. There could be other priority populations. There could be other types of programming, other outcomes that you are wanting to meet, but we just gave you some examples. And we also have more information about these priority areas within our strategic investment plan. Next slide. I'm about to turn it over to Patrick, but on our website, please go visit it. It provides more information about current applications, current applicants and new applicants. It also has resources for you. You can access the online grant application form, and it tells you how to contact us and how to stay connected with us. So please check that out. And with that, I will turn it over to Patrick. But actually, before I do, David, Lupe, Patrick, is there anything that you wanted to speak to on any of the slides that I already talked about?
Nothing in general, but if anyone has questions, feel free to put it in the Q&A part of the webinar, and we're happy to hop on and answer any questions, unless they'll be addressed during the presentation.
Thank you, Lupe.
And I also include this in the chat, but a recording and the PowerPoint of a proposal meeting, which we're holding now, will be available by this Friday on our website as well.
Great. All right. Thank you. I'm turning it over to Patrick.
All right, thank you. Next slide. Okay, so the proposal is broken out into 5 broad categories, or more common nomenclature, buckets. So the first bucket is agency and proposal information. And as LaShonda had referenced earlier, that information coordinates or corresponds with the page references that you see. So please feel free. I encourage you to reference those pages. Our second bucket is the proposal narrative. And this includes the template and the demographic profile and some appendices as well. The third category bucket there is the budget. And the fourth is required documents, and we'll go through detail about what all those required documents are. And the final category bucket there is just your proposal submission and acknowledgement. Next slide. So step one, or that first category, is the agency and proposal information found on page 36. And what that part of the proposal template will be asking for is just some basic information about your organization, contacts, etc., what category you're interested in applying for, and you'll select the application type for your organization. Next slide. The second major category of the proposal is the proposal narrative. And here's a very important point, is that the proposal template is going to be limited to 10 pages. So you have 10 pages from the very first page of the template to the 10th page of your template, right? And what's important to note is that those 10 pages does not include your budgets, your resumes, work experience, or any of the appendices that are attached. And the submission deadline is June 1st. That's a Tuesday at 2 p.m. June 1st, which is a Tuesday at 2 p.m. We've done midnight. So don't find yourself caught out of kind of the loop in that by not noticing this very important, not only date, but time. So on this page, we have 10-page max for your proposal template, deadline of Tuesday, June 1st at 2 p.m. And there you can see the point breakdown. Program summary, there is unscored. Agency history and capacity is 20. Program design is 35. Outcomes and impacts is 25. And the required resources and budget is 20 for a total of 100. Next slide. Third major RFP, or your proposal submission, is the budget. And what we're looking to see is that there is a clear link between what you've included in your narrative proposal and what you have there on the template, the budget document template. We are looking for that projections to be accurate in reference to the coming fiscal year, which is starting July 1 through June 30th of 22. And we want to make sure that you are being efficient. We want, again, a reflection and speak to the matching requirement. That is that there are additional sources of revenue that you will be seeking during if you're awarded a grant, during your grant period as well. Next slide. The required documents include a copy of your IRS letter. So that letter says that you are a 501c3. We'll also need financial statements and organizational budget for the lead agency. So let's make that very clear. So if you're applying as a collaborative applicant, not a 5B organization, but under the collaborative applicant category, the lead agency IRS 501c3 letter is what we're looking at. We want the lead agency's financial statements. We want the lead agency's organizational budget. We want the lead agency's list of board of directors and their affiliations. We want, if you are not a 501c3, you can access a fiscal sponsor, and we will want to see a fiscal sponsorship letter of agreement that outlines that you are in partnership with an organization that does have 501c3 tax status. And we will also want a collaborative applicant letter of agreement if you are applying under the collaborative applicant category. And we'll go into some detail about this maybe a little bit more. Next slide. Finally, because this is an online submission, we'll want to ensure, and you will be affirming to on the webpage when you upload your documents and you're ready to submit, you will be affirming that you, the individual submitting the documentation, is either an officer on the board or an authorized individual or staff person from the board submitting the proposal. You'll be acknowledging or affirming that you've reviewed the requirements, that the proposal is complete, that you are and your organization is prepared to obtain background checks and fingerprints for supporting underage minors and ensuring safety as it relates to the individuals that will be working directly with them, that the information is true and correct to the best of your knowledge, and you will type in an electronic signature, and then once you press submit, you will receive a receipt for submission via email. Next slide. So now we'll get directly into the proposal template. We'll walk through it here. Next slide. So this is the proposal template, and it can be found on our webpage on the RFCY grants page. What you'll do is you'll download this. And so this is a Word document. And as you can see there, section 1, agency and proposal information, and immediately underneath that you see included in the responses in section 1, which is this section here. This proposal shall be 10 pages. So I just want to start off by saying following directions and paying attention to details is one way, an easy way to separate yourself as an applicant. Because when organizations don't follow directions or pay attention to details, it identifies them in ways that they don't want to be identified, right? You want us to not be distracted by certain things, and you want us to really judge your application based on the merits and the quality of what you put in here. So follow directions and pay attention to details. Here's one, 10 pages. So Callie, our intern, has formulated a fictional organization called Kidspace. She's given us some contact information and phone numbers and emails. And it's important that you provide the project manager's contact information here. Obviously, the executive director is listed, but the project manager is the most important in the sense that if we have a question, once the application is submitted, that will be the person that we reach out to. And so we want to make sure that not only is this email something that's accurate and true, and the phone number as well, but these are things that are monitored. So make sure that the person's contact information is not only true, but it's something that's monitored, because we run into situations where people are like, I don't even check that email. Not a good idea. So finally, Callie's given us a very, very brief summary of Kidspace, and what she's hit is some major, I think some really good things in her program summary. She tells us that, hey, Kidspace offers quality care and tutoring services. That's what? To young children with an emphasis on providing LGBTQ and non-binary youth with safe spaces to learn. That's who. So she's not only told us what they're doing, she's telling us who they're trying to support. And Callie hit that one of our priority areas, which again is something that is outlined in our strategic investment plan and also is also referenced in the RFP, which is why LaShonda was encouraging you, and I encourage you as well, to review those documents and those priority areas, because the measure does call some specific priority populations. Next slide. So if you are applying as a collaborative applicant, we want you to list your organizations, your partnering organizations here, right? As well. And not only that, as we go down, you'll see that we also want you to identify your priority area. Now, it's necessary to say that certain organizations, as LaShonda referenced, are dynamic. And so as a consequence of them being dynamic, there could be some overlap as it relates to where you fit in a priority area. So our advice to you is, for the program that you are seeking funding for with this proposal, where does that program best fit? Not perfectly fit, but where does that program best fit? within the priority areas listed here. So it is important that you all take the time to become as familiar with these priority areas as you can, so that when the assessment or evaluation of your organization is taking place and our reviewers are scoring, that the fit is there, right? So it doesn't have to be a perfect match. There could be overlap, but where does your program that you're seeking funding for best fit? Next slide. So now, section 2, proposal narrative. So here we've gone past kind of some of that preliminary agency and proposal information, and now we're getting into you really parsing out and sharing with us a little bit more about your organization and your history and their background of the work that you've done. Again, 10 pages. So we want a summary. We provided a brief summary up top. This summary might be a little bit more detailed, but it's still very pithy. It's 100 words, right? So give us just a little bit more than you might have in the top section there. Then we'll have agency history and capacity. This is the first section in the proposal that is scored. And so here you can see that it's worth 20 points, right? And so a strategy, doesn't have to be, but a strategy could be is, where has the department and the Oversight Board divvied out points? And so maybe I use my space real estate based on and prioritize the information that we put based on where they're giving the most points. It's a strategy. Didn't have to do that, but it's a strategy. So we want to know a little bit about your organization. We want to also know the experience that your organization has. And we're looking for you to demonstrate that the people that you are going to have in your organization are experienced, informed, trained, educated about the work that you're planning to do. So this helps us understand that you are not only engaged, but you're qualified, you have background experience, and you hopefully are going to be demonstrating here through some of that narrative, the passion that you bring to this work. Okay, next slide. So here, program design is worth 35 points. And so we want you under this section to really parse out what the program is. What are the nuts and bolts of the program? So identifying the population that you will be serving in the program. And so again, being familiar with not only the fact that we're serving young people from birth to 24, but what are the things that are highlighted in the strategic investment plan that the department and the Oversight Board are saying, here are some young people that we recognize are often underserved and under-resourced. Be familiar, right? And how is it that you plan to touch or reach those young people, right? To introduce them or to engage them in the services and the programming that you have provided, right? Tell us what the design type will be. Tell us what services you're going to be providing, how long, when, where, what times of the year, what geographic areas, what neighborhoods, what zip codes. We'll also, again, as LaShonda said, the power of youth voice. We'll want to know that youth have had some say, or you've sought them for information or research or input or feedback on the program design. And we'll want to know how you might have reached out to other organizations to support you in this. Now, this question here is for everyone because we don't work in silos. And I also want to say that it is very important that our collaborative applicants and our Section 5B organizations pay very special attention to this question, right? Because as a collaborative applicant or a Section 5B, collaboration is required. And so we want you to identify the roles. We want you to identify the functions, right? And for those Section 5B, we want to know how is it that you've collaborated either in conversation, in input, in feedback with those CBOs who might already be supporting the young people that you're currently supporting. Next slide. And we'll also be hoping that you will be discussing the proposed program and in relationship to the impact on COVID. We understand the impact of COVID-19, not only on you as service providers, but on the young people that you all support day in and day out. And so we'd love to hear what that's looked like for you and share maybe what shifts you've made, what innovation you've done, or share what the struggle and burden has been, right? And maybe that also lets us know why right? Gives us some context about why maybe you may be asking for what you're asking for because of the impact of COVID. So outcomes and impacts is the next section, is 25 points, right? And so this section really is about you measuring or counting or evaluating what you've done. So we want you to think about what is that you anticipate the outcomes will be. How many young people will you be able to serve, and where will those young people be, right? And we understand that this is projection, right? You can't necessarily know, but we want you to use some data here, right? So if you know what literacy, the impacts of literacy are on young people by a certain age, share that information, right? If you know the health impacts of not having fruits and vegetables is on young people, share that, right? If you know what trauma does to young people in certain neighborhoods and how that impacts them physically, share that information. So again, it provides us context for us to look at why you're doing or what you're asking for. We want to know performance measurements, right? So what do you anticipate you're going to do, how you're going to count it? And we want to see those numbers maybe from your past or prior years, right? So what does your performance look like in prior years for programming that may have been similar, may not have been exact, but it might have been similar. Also on question 11, we're aware that there might be some new organizations. And so some organizations may not have up to 3 years, but whatever you got from the past, we want to know that you've been doing some work for some time up to 3 years. Next slide. So required resources and budgets. This is worth 20 points. So we're interested in what the program expenses for your proposal will be for the next fiscal year, and what may have been changed as a consequence of coming from this current fiscal year to the next. We'll want to know how the funds are going to be used to support the work. So again, this narrative section will mirror the table that we're going to come into in just a minute. And we'll also want to understand how revenue flows into your organization, and specifically how revenue flows into your organization to support the program that you're asking for. Do you all charge fees, right? Or collect fees? Are the organizations free of charge? And so as a consequence, you see foundation funding and so forth, right? And so we'll be looking for you to spell some of that out here in a narrative form. But as we move to the next slide, David, you'll see that we'll also be using a table. So here is the budget table. And for Callie's organization, Kidspace, she's requesting $200,000, right? And so what I do want to say is, again, following directions and attention to detail, if I see an organization budget that says $200,000 and I see financials that show you are 990 in, which means you brought in less than 50,000, that raises questions for me, right? And so now I'm paying attention to things. You're drawing attention to your application in ways that you really don't want me to. All that wonderful narrative that you put in your template, that's where you want me focusing my attention, not on technicality. So again, it's just another point of saying attention to detail and following direction. So when we look at this table, we see there are two categories, revenue and expenditures. Those are the two major categories there horizontally. So what Callie has done in this table is she's listed or identified or shared with us the revenue, which is a fancy word for how income flows into her organization. She's also in that second column saying how much she's requesting. She's telling us what the overall project budget is, and she's telling us what the status of some of that income is. So she's got some membership fees, she's got donations in kind, Pretend Foundation, and she's got the RFCY funding. And so in that column, RFCY request, there's 30,000. Tip, there should only be one number in this second column here at the top under revenue. Under revenue, the only number that should be entered is what you are requesting from the department. When we move over one column, the total project budget, right? So Callie's requesting $30,000, right? She's a small and emerging applicant organization. But what she's telling us is that her overall project for Kidspace, right, which supports education and learning for LGBTQI and non-binary young folks in Richmond, is actually $50,000. And then we move over one more column. She says, hey, my project, what I want from you is 30. It really costs 50. And let me share with you where that revenue is as far as whether we have the dollars or whether it's pending. A lot of this stuff is been processed, some of this stuff is pending. So we want to know that you're accessing funds. We drop down to expenditures. Again, we can see here that there's a category, there's the RFCY request, her total project budget, and then she gives us some narrative, some context. I want to give you another point. The revenue total for the RFCY request and the total project budget, there's 30,050. Under expenditure, when we drop to the last line of this table, it's 30,050. Those totals, revenue total should match expenditure total, and total project revenue and total project expenditure should be the same. If those numbers don't match, you are drawing attention to yourself in ways you don't want to do. So Callie identifies how she's going to spend or anticipate spending the dollars she could potentially be awarded. She says, hey, we got supplies, we want facility rental, we're going to take the kids on some trips, and we got to pay some people to help support this, right? On that next column, she says, for example, under supplies, she says program supplies are 5,000, but really what we need is the overall thing is 10, but we've got dollars. As she says up above, we've got dollars in other ways. And then she gives us some context for what those supplies look like, right? And as you chart down, you can see that she does that again. I would say this, for your collaborative applicants, if you are a collaborative applicant, not a Section 5B, but a collaborative applicant, which means you are jointly applying for funding, on this table, tell us if you are Kidspace, right? And let's say you are the SEALS group, right? That's my last name. The Kidspace and the SEALS group are applying. I want to know what dollars are going to Kidspace, and I also want you to break out for the funding, what dollars are going to the SEALS group, right? Don't meld those in, break that out, make it easy for us to understand your story. And again, this table should align with your narrative. Everything should make sense to us. It should be cohesive. Next slide. So again, these tables, this Appendix B Demographics table is also going to support what you've shared, but really, it really gets at the, it's more empirical, right? And it's easy to see. So here, Callie's planning to support 50 young people with her program, and she lets us know, again, we are aware that these numbers are projection, but she's giving us her best guess, right? Her best estimate based off of maybe past practice and past experience and her work, who she plans to support. She plans to support young people that identify as Asian, Black, and mixed race. And she tells us how old they're going to be, right? She fills this in. And she's got some middle schoolers and high schoolers, right, that she's going to be supporting that identify as Latinx and white, and those be 20. Again, following directions, attention to detail. Her total participants are 50, 30 plus 20 is 50. Let's move down, gender, right? She's got 10 young people that identify as male, 10 that identify as female, and 30 that identify as non-binary. Again, 50. What we don't want to see is 50, 47, 23, then it gets confusing. And again, we're focusing on things you don't want us to focus on. You want us to be thinking about the heart of your program and it's the impact it'll have. So as you review, if you're applying again, it might be important that at one stage, you have somebody do a technical review just for consistency's sake across some of this stuff. And she's also telling us where these young people are going to be coming from, right? She's got some people from the 801, the 803, and the 804. For a total of 50. There's a narrative down there at the bottom box if you need it to share some more context, because maybe there's an exception or there's a unique situation that your organization has. Next slide. So here we want activity and operations projections. So name program activities. And so there's some categories here. These are drop boxes. Some of these are, excuse me. So the name of the program, so she's doing individual tutoring and she's doing educational trips, right? And then under category, that's a drop down, right? Is it individual? Is it consulting? Is it small group, right? She lets us know that the tutoring will be individual. She tells us how many sessions per quarter, and she tells us how many people will be participating, how long the tutoring sessions will be, and she gives a small description of what that tutoring session will consist of. Is staff tutors helping young people with homework and subjects like math, right? And then she gives the same information contextually for the field trips. So again, it's parsing out numerically, empirically, the narrative components. Next slide. So program operations and location. Here, Callie tells us when her program will be operating, right? In all the ways that she can, right? It's going to be operating every week of each month of the year, or almost each month of the year. And she'll be working during the week, Monday through Friday. So Callie's not doing anything on the weekends. And we can see by her program operations hours, 12 to 8, she's not doing anything in the mornings, right? So Callie is working every day of the week, Monday through Friday, 12 to 8 p.m. And we also are interested in where your organization will be providing services, right? So we know where you've identified or shared with us where the young people are coming from. We also want to know where you will be when they access the services. And this information is helpful, I think, because of the concept that I like called equity in place, right? It is important for us as a department to gather this information because you all are doing fantastic work, and we are interested in not only the work that you do, but the details such as this. Is like, when does that organization operate? What days does that organization operate? And what hours does that organization operate, right? Because if we only fund organizations that are operating during the week, that means that that parent or guardian that has a young person on the weekend, there are no services provided. If you're only providing operational hours during the morning, then that means maybe after school isn't taken care of, or maybe evenings aren't taken care of, right? And also, it's important not only that we are talking and uplifting the concept of equity as it relates to providing services to young people who are often underserved and under-resourced, but it is also very important that we understand the concept of equity in place so that we know that young people benefit when not only they receive the services, but they receive the services when they get them in the neighborhoods that they live in. I'm not saying all of this to have you fabricate or change your model, right? I'm just letting you know, giving you a little insight into the concept of what we are going to be looking at, right? So that we create as broad a portfolio of organizations who provide and support young people across as many areas, across as broad a geographical area as we can. And so that's just a little insight. I'm excited to learn more and see what you all have been presenting and will put forth, and just sharing a little bit there. So I think now we're going to move on to the next slides, and that concludes my portion.
All right, thank you, Patrick. Next slide, please. So here is a overview of our review process, and can be found on pages 47 and 48 of the RFP. So you will submit your application on time, ahead of time, please, so that it can make it through our review process. That is the first step. After that, city staff will review your application to make sure you met eligibility requirements and provided all the documents we needed. That takes a little bit of time. It helps our lives. It helps your life if you have reviewed your application before you submitted it. You checked every box. You've given us everything. You've asked us any questions you had before you submitted the application. That helps it be a really smooth process for us to move your application to the next phase, which is that we will provide your application based on the priority area for which you submit your application under to a member of our review committee. So we have a number of people on the review committee from different walks of life, different organizations that will be reviewing all the applications. City department staff, in terms of Richmond Department of Children and Youth staff, do not review or score your applications. That is our review committee. And so they will individually score whatever applications they have. And then all of those applications, staff will take all of those application scores, and we will rank them by priority area. Then there'll be conversations amongst the review panel about those scores, And eventually the recommendations in terms of scoring, in terms of funding will be provided to our Oversight Board. The Oversight Board will have a public meeting at a date in July. That is our estimate, that's our aim, to talk about the recommendations from the different review panel members, the different groups. And they will then make their recommendation to the full city council later in July. So we are really trying to wrap all of this up as quickly as possible between the months of June and July, so that our council can make approve the recommendations before they go on recess. Next slide. If you are able to have the opportunity to work with us and you are awarded a grant, there are a number of things that need to happen. And so here are a list of the requirements for our grantees. You will be entering into a grant agreement or city contract with the city. And if you have a fiscal sponsor, once again, the city will be entering into that grant agreement with the fiscal sponsor. If you've never received funding from the city, you'll have to submit a W-9 and vendor supplemental form. You will have to get a Richmond business license. We try and provide all that information for you, answer as many questions and provide as many documents as we can as part of the RFP. You'll have to meet our insurance requirements. And then, that's just to get the application, the contract done. And then once we execute the contract, you're providing your services, we will, of course, require reports and invoices. We'll be doing some evaluation around your programming, and we'll be conducting either virtual or in-person site visits, depending on how you are providing your services. Next slide. If you are awarded a grant, here are the two ways for which you can receive payment. We know that it is really important. So we would appreciate if it is all possible, and it is our preference that we award funding based on a reimbursement basis, which means you have sufficient funding to be able to provide your service, and then you submit the required documents to us and we reimburse you. And that can be done on a quarterly basis. We, however, understand all organizations cannot or do not want to do that, and therefore we have an option for advance payment. More information is available on page 51 of the RFP, but we do it in 25% increments. And so you are able to get an initial advance after execution of your grant agreement of 25%. That allows you to provide your services. You have the money to do that. We then ask for all the backup documentation that will be clearly articulated in your grant agreement to substantiate how you spent that 25%. Once we have everything we need, you provided us with your report about the work you're doing, we will release another 25%. We do that 3 times to get you 75% of your money in advance for you to do your work, but we will be holding back the last 25%. And we will be doing that and you'll get that funding on a reimbursement basis. And this is part of the reason why for us it's really important that we are not your only funding source, because you will need to be able to access some of the other funds to be able to get through that last quarter, that last 25% before we can reimburse you for that last installment. Next slide. Here is our timeline. So we released the RFP on May 4th. This is our second pre-proposal meeting. And once again, it will be posted. You have until tomorrow at 5 p.m. to, if you are a current applicant, you have until 5 p.m. tomorrow. We should add this to our slide to tell us that you want to withdraw your proposal. But you also have until that time to email us any questions that you have not been able to ask, that we have not been able to answer. We will provide an answer to your questions by 5 p.m. on the 17th. Proposals are due by 2 p.m. on June 1st. They need to be submitted electronically, not in person. And then we are going to go through our review process and all of that through the months of June and July, with final approval happening from our Oversight Board in July, as well as the City Council in July. And then staff will be working with those who receive funding to enter into contracts. And then we are really hoping that we're going to be doing this as fast as possible so that organizations can be able to spend funding from the program year of July 1, even though contracts won't be executed until later, but from July 1 through June 30th, which is our first program year. Next slide. All right, that concludes our presentation. Thank you for sticking with us through it. And we are available to answer any questions that you have. And I believe David is going to help, and Lupe can help guide us through that process. Thank you all.